This is Mr. Huang, and this is the third lesson for our first project, for our favorite foods comic project. So, before we get started, I just want to show you some of the materials you're going to need for this project. First, you're going to need a piece of paper, a regular drawing pencil with an eraser, and then, optional, you may want to get a ruler. And to finish off the project, you can use whatever you have to draw and color with. Before I get started, I just want to quickly review the things that we've done so far for lesson 1 and 2, because you're going to need these things to complete this final lesson. In lesson 1, I asked you to brainstorm some ideas of your favorite food, the situations, and different characters you may want to use for this project. Here are my answers from lesson 1. In lesson 2, we took the question number 4 from lesson 1, your characters, and I asked you to make drawings of each one of these characters. So, in lesson 2, you should have developed your characters into drawings. So now for this final lesson, you're going to put these characters together and the ideas that you brainstormed in lesson 1 to make your actual comic strip. So for the first step of this last lesson, you're going to need a sheet of paper, and you can turn it landscape or hot dog, or you can turn it portrait or hamburger mode. That's up to you, however you want to complete this project. But there are 2 ways you can complete step number 1 for this project. But either way, the first part will be the same. When you're folding it, you can either fold it or you can draw it into 4 sections. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to demonstrate how to draw your 4 sections. So depending on how you want to turn your paper, I'm going to turn my paper this way because comic strips tend to be landscape, but you can turn it portrait if you like. And just about halfway in the middle of your paper from top to bottom, you can use a ruler if you want to, or you can use your hands and just free draw it. I'm just going to use a ruler. And I'm just going to look about halfway and I'm going to softly draw my line from top to bottom. Just in case I make a mistake, I can erase it. After I draw my line from top to bottom, I'm going to go across my paper in the middle from left to right. Once again, you don't have to measure it. It's just about an eyeball. You can just about guess where the middle is and draw a soft line. In case you make mistakes, you can erase it. You want to do a lot of soft drawing during this step because you're just planning out your comic strip at this point. And if you do make mistakes, you just want to be able to easily erase them. So that's one way you can have step number 1 completed, by drawing your 4 sections. Or alternatively, you may get another sheet of paper and you can simply fold it in half. Take a piece of paper, fold it in half from top to bottom, or bottom to top, whichever is easier for you. Unfold the paper and then fold it the other way in half. And this way you'll have 4 separate sections. You can turn it that way, or you can turn it this way. That's up to you. So that's step number 1. For step number 2, you're simply going to start decorating your comic in frame number 1. Frame number 1 is the one I'm calling the one in the top left corner right here. In frame number 1, you're going to get to add your comic title, a picture to decorate within the frame, and also write your name in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with this one. This is what I call your free space, because you get to have all the freedom you want, because this is your comic, to add your own title, your own pictures, and you got to put your name in there so we know who to give credit to. So I'm going to go ahead and do this for step number 2. And my character is named Peppy the Pizza, so I'm going to call my comic Peppy Day. So here's frame number 1. So that's step number 2. You're just decorating your first frame with your title, some pictures, and make sure to sign your name in this first frame. That's it. For step number 3, you're really going to have to think about the problems that we listed in lesson number 1. So here's my lesson number 1 answers. And I'm going to focus on this question right here, number 2. And I'm going to pick one of the problems that my favorite food would have if it were alive. So I'm going to choose this one right here for my comic, is that Peppy Pizza is too greasy. So that's what my whole comic is going to be about. So remember, this is a comic, and a comic just tells a quick, short story. It's not you don't want to get too many details in there because you don't have that many frames to tell your story. So I'm just going over a basic 4-frame comic right now. Some of you can go do more, but I don't recommend going more than 10 because then it just gets too long. Comics are meant to be short, so you're going to have to really think about your idea to have a beginning, a middle, and an ending. So that's why I'm really keeping it down to 4 frames, because this is our first comic project. I have 3 extra frames left. Frame 2, frame 3, and frame 4. 1 frame for each. The beginning, the middle, and the end of your comic story. So for step number 3, I'm going to pick my problem of Peppy Pizza being too greasy, and I'm going to really introduce the problem. So you have to think before you start drawing. Think about an image that would really get across what the problem of being too greasy would be about. So I'm going to think about this, and I can use images and words together. I can use something called speech bubbles, because that's the way we show communication sometimes in comics, is by using speech bubbles to show that the characters are talking to one another. So for this first one, to introduce my problem, I'm just going to introduce a couple characters. I'm going to introduce Peppy Pizza talking with Cheesy the hamburger, or cheeseburger actually. So I'm going to introduce them, and I'm going to have some speech bubbles in this one because I want to introduce the problem that Peppy Pizza is too greasy. Okay. Okay. So frame number 2, introduce the problem somehow with a picture, and if you want to, use a speech bubble to add some words to show that your characters are talking to each other. Okay. So that's going to be my simple frame number 2. Remember, don't color anything at this point. We're going to do all that and adding more details at the end. So for step number 5, you're going to think about the next moment in your comic. So in step 4, we introduced the problem. So the problem was Peppy's too greasy, and I want everybody to know that Peppy's greasy, and that's the problem. So Cheesy is saying, Peppy, you look really greasy today. So what's the next moment in your comic? Remember, you may only have 2 frames left, so it's very important you pick a moment that's really going to be important and big in your story, because after this one, you only have your final concluding frame. So after this, I want to show that Peppy really is looking greasy, and I'm going to use this second frame of my story, actual story frame, which is frame number 3, to introduce the other characters of Nilla the milkshake, and maybe I'll bring another character. You do not have to use all the characters that you developed in your brainstorming session, but if you want to, this would be probably a good time if you haven't already introduced all your characters. But so in this frame right here, I'm going to talk about the next moment after the problem has already been identified. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this frame to really show that Peppy is greasy by introducing other characters noticing the same thing about Peppy Pizza. And you can always add more things to your picture as you come along and think about them. Maybe I can have a clock right here in the back, and I'll show that it's about noon or 12 o'clock. just so everybody knows it's about lunchtime. And that's another way you can add the passing of time in your story, is just to show something simple like a clock. So maybe this one is 12:01 or something. So I could just move this hand a little bit right here, just to show that the time passed a little bit. But just any little thing like that. So that's step number 5, telling the next part of your story. It's got to be a pretty big moment because you only have one more frame after this. So you want to move your story along, not just slowly. If you do decide to use more than 4 frames total, then you can take a little bit more time in developing your story. But if you're doing a 4-frame comic, you really got to move your story along. Okay, so my next one is, how is this all going to end? And that will be step 6. Now we're on the final frame if you're doing a 4-frame comic. In this last frame, this is where the conclusion or resolution to the problem of Peppy being too greasy really happens. You want to close your comic right here. This short story is closing. So far you introduced the problem. You had another moment in that story, and now you're going to really close it up. So really quickly, it says, Peppy, you look really greasy today. That's what Cheesy says to Peppy in frame number 1. In the second frame of my comic, Nilla reconfirms what Cheesy said by saying, Cheesy is right. You look terrible. And Cheesy says, you see, nobody is going to eat you if you're too greasy. So for this last frame, how am I going to end this comic? So for this, I'm going to put a moment in and think about it, but I know how I want to end this story. I've been thinking about this as I was preparing this lesson. I'm going to make Cheesy be completely right with his last comment. So Peppy is going to play really greasy, pretend to be really greasy. When I say play greasy, he's going to pretend to be greasy. And I'm going to put the X's in the eyes to make it look like he's not alive. He's going to be playing dead, right? So Cheesy in the last frame said, you see, nobody's going to eat you. And you know what? If you're food and you're trying to survive, that might be a good thing. You probably don't want anybody eating you. So I'm going to make Peppy really, really greasy right here. He's just swimming in grease right now. And then at that moment, I'm just going to have some hands showing up, grabbing Nilla. And maybe the same person's arms are over here. And it doesn't have to be human, so it doesn't even have to have the same number of fingers, right? Grabbing Cheesy. And Cheesy is gonna be looking really scared right now. And Nilla too. Nilla, who has been smiling in frame 2, will not be smiling in this frame because she's getting taken away and about to be eaten. And so I introduced speech bubbles before, but for this one, I'm going to use another tool that people use. I'm going to make this look like a shirt, like somebody's coming over. Yeah. So this is going to be like somebody's shirt. You can't see the whole thing, so I'm just going to put that in. Okay. And then I'll just have their shirt on like this too. All right. I'm going to introduce another technique that comics use, and it's called thinking bubbles or thought bubbles. So instead of drawing a speech bubble that looks like these right here where they're speaking, you can draw little circles that lead to another circle. And then these are called thought bubbles. And it shows what a character is thinking, not saying. Because if they're characters, my foods are characters, I don't want them to be speaking. That would freak people out. So Peppy Pizza is going to be thinking, exactly, cheesy. No one will eat me. And maybe I'll turn this frown, that right there, to a smiling. Now that he's the only food of the three that does not get taken away. And I'm just going to add to this, add some more details really quick just to show that this is the same background. Okay. And also, you can always add more details as your story develops because you're thinking of new things as your story goes. So maybe another way I can make the story develop is in frame number 1, I had a person in the background. Maybe this is that person. So maybe I can show this person getting closer to the table, maybe approaching the table. So I'll make her a little bigger in this one and with some shadowing just to show that they're coming over towards the table to pick up their food, to choose some food to eat. So that's the conclusion of my comic strip, is developing the story and just drawing and sketching things out. That's step number 6. After you finish drawing your comic frames 1, 2, 3, and 4, step number 7 is just to proofread all of the things you wrote if you've written anything. You want to make sure you spelled all your words correctly. That's step number 7. You just want to make sure you go over and edit your work in case you need to make any changes. You can add more details to your picture at this point, fix anything, because you should have done everything in a pencil up to this point. Okay, so I'll add a little bit right here. I can add a couple more cans back here if I want. Maybe I'll put the, yeah, I think that's enough in terms of drawing. And I'm checking my words to make sure everything is spelled correctly. I can't see that too well. And then the final step, number 8, is you can start adding color to your project. That means you can trace over your lines if you like them, erase things you don't want, and just add color to make it more interesting. So I'm going to just quickly take some time and color in my comic strip. And here's my completed sample comic. I hope you enjoyed this project, and I can't wait to see all of your comics. Remember, be on the lookout for the YouTube demonstration on how to turn in your project, because this is what you're going to turn in. This is the only part of the project you're turning in, which is the completed part of your project. So watch the video on how to do it. Take a look at the comic examples I sent you. Watch this video as many times as you want to. And I can't wait until you turn in your projects. Have a great day. Bye-bye.